Time to cross it over. It is Hawkeyes. It is Badgers. It is the Big Ten West Championship game. Not a whole lot there. Trent and Ryan with you today. Locked on Hawkeyes and Locked on Badgers. Welcome in here today. Thanks for joining us. This is a crossover edition on Locked On. I was getting ready to hit the liner, but that's for Locked On Hawkeyes. I don't want to do that. So it's just you and me, Ryan, here going in and getting ready for this one. Iowa, Wisconsin, 3 o'clock on Saturday. It is Big Fox that will have it. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Badgers is brought to you by Jace Medical. Jace Medical, a presenting sponsor for the podcast. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 or more infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's Jace, Jase, medical.com. Right, let's get into it and start with a little bit of overview. I'll throw it to you first. You're number one of Luke Fickell. One loss on the season. You're playing in a terrible division. Where you guys are and going through, obviously, a very big transition with year number one.
Yeah, not quite where I think fans or I expected. I think a lot of us thought it'd be a little cleaner. At the end of the day, though, it's an offense averaging 31 points per game. It's still going through teething processes, right? Like, I think there is nationally a notion that Wisconsin should be a little further along. But when you zoom out, year one for a coaching rebuild, brand new staff, new schemes on both sides, a bunch of new players, new transfers, and you're 4-1 and you're averaging 31 points a game, right? I mean, we weren't that's what would an Iowa fan do for 31 points a game? I'm assuming annex half your state, right? Like, so I think it's fine. This is actually the record I predicted we would have at this point. I thought we would lose to Washington State. So I kind of feel like we're right on track. It's just a little slower than we anticipated the train moving.
I can see that. And I have watched every Wisconsin game, except for one on the BTN in 60. So I've got a view, and it's funny because if you just look at the box scores, you just kind of look at the end game score, you do that, and you're like, boy, they must be flying high. But watching each of those games, I wasn't wowed by Wisconsin. It wasn't where, boy, this team is off and running. They're going to run away with the division. I don't think the box score and the final scores have kind of really painted the full picture of this season. Is that fair?
Probably to some degree it is. Although you look at some of the games, the first Big Ten game they played on the road, going to Purdue, a Purdue team that needed that game. They really controlled that entire game. They're playing a Rutgers team that it looks much better under Schiano. And again, Rutgers never threatened in that game. So they've done a bit of a mini Michigan thing. Like, make no mistake, they are nowhere close to Michigan. But they've won some games where maybe the score, the box score doesn't look as impressive, but they've controlled a lot of the game script. There's really been very few teams where Wisconsin down the stretch has really been stressed by the opponent. Obviously, Washington State on the road. Washington State's a good team with a real quarterback, and that was a game that Wisconsin was right in. They had a late turnover. They could have won that game. Could have, would have, should have. I don't think they deserved to win that game, but I think they've controlled the game scripts for the most part. And even though, this is where I went back and said it's not as pretty as I think a lot of people expected it to be. But I think a lot of people overlook the amount of turnover and transition, and just there's growing pains with the whole new staff. Again, that being said, though, you look back to where we were last year under Paul Chryst, where there should have been no growing pains. Illinois was murdering us. Like, you saw that version of Wisconsin up close and personal. We are so far ahead of that version of Wisconsin. That was a broken team. This feels like a team still coalescing that still has trajectory to grow this year. So there's still optimism on the Wisconsin side. There's a couple deep pass plays we've had that we just haven't been able to connect on. I think we're right there, really where we should be realistically, and not where we should have been from the fans' probably heightened expectations. Right? You bring Luke Fickell in, and you feel like you're on cloud nine. It's going to click right away because of his history and his pedigree. I think this is more realistically where we should have thought we would be this year, kind of 5 games in.
And honestly, from my perspective, this is kind of where I thought you were going to be. We talked a little bit in our back and forth on Slack and stuff for Locked On, and I know how optimistic you were coming into the season. I thought the transition was going to take a little bit longer. I'll let you throw it back my way. I also thought things would be a little bit further along here from an Iowa perspective. Injuries have obviously derailed this season, and our idiot offensive coordinator.
Let me ask you, I have a couple questions I'm fascinated with here. The first is, I just want to zoom out a little bit. Why did you think it'd be better? Like, and that's not a you question. It's more of an Iowa fan, because I got this vibe from Iowa fans too, bringing in, McNamara, and it's going to be different. I thought McNamara was fine at Michigan.
Mhm.
I don't feel like was the solution at Iowa. I think it's the ecosystem. It's obviously the OC. Why did everybody think it'd be better after years of seeing this offense?
Well, if you watch Spencer Petras the last 3 years, I mean, that's a reason for it. He was just terrible. And you look at the numbers and how they regressed after the crazy 2020 season. He was bad in 2021 and even worse in 2022. He had mentally just completely broken. Simple out routes, 5-yard out routes. He couldn't complete them. He was sailing them. He was so mentally broken that you figure with a competent quarterback, a quarterback that his greatest strength of Cade McNamara is his accuracy, was going to get this thing moving along. Now McNamara suffers the injury in August camp, never was healthy all season long before eventually tearing his ACL. So there was no shot. The other part of it, and the reason for optimism, is the offensive line was so bad the last 2 years. It was as bad as it's been ever in the Kirk Ferentz era, going all the way back when he was out there playing Bruce Nelson and Robert Gallery at 250 pounds as freshmen his first couple of years, just because they were so depleted here. Those offensive lines were better than what we saw the last couple of seasons. They brought in 2 transfers. That was a hope that was going to help out. One still has not been able to get on the field because of injury. So you have that part of it. And those younger guys that were taking those lumps, becoming upperclassmen, Connor Colby, Mason Richmond, you thought, all right, they're going to take the big leap this year. And it just hasn't happened. The offensive line has been pretty good. Pass blocking, actually. Run blocking has gotten better the last couple of weeks, but still not at the level. So that was where the optimism came from. Offensive line is at least going to be adequate. Accurate quarterback, something that Iowa hasn't had in 3 seasons. You put those 2 things together, you bring in a couple of wide receivers, the run game will be fine, really talented running backs, and they're going to be good. That's where the optimism came from, but I guess we forgot who's still running the ship there on the offense of Brian Ferentz.
Yeah, the other question I had for you, and this is something I was thinking about in the offseason. What was the vibe for Iowa fans? See, because Iowa continuity, right? Wisconsin and Iowa for the longest time. There's continuity. We are who we are. What was the vibe for Iowa fans in general sticking with Brian Ferentz and then seeing Wisconsin, whether it works long term or not, right, for Wisconsin, but seeing Wisconsin drastically say, no, this isn't working. We're tearing it down. Forget tradition in a certain sense. We're going to modernize. What was the thought? Because I've always thought for the longest time, Iowa and Wisconsin are kind of co-patriots, right? We're very similar. Right. And then to see Wisconsin just so quickly flip it, I'm curious what the perspective on that change for Iowa was.
I think there's some frustration from some of the fan base, certainly, to see that. And there are very few people that want to see Kirk Ferentz be pushed out of the door. I mean, what he has done with this program, the kind of person that he is, the successes that he has had, people don't want to do that. And for us older people out there, we also remember the transition going from Dr. Tom Davis on the basketball program, pushing him out the door. A successful coach, didn't get to the heights you wanted to see, wanted to get to that next level. So you don't renew his contract. He has a lame duck year. You bring in Steve Alford thinking that's going to lead to these heights that you hadn't been in a long time. And he took a step down. And then it cratered under Todd Lickliter afterwards. And it still hasn't come back. Now, Fran McCaffrey's put together a very successful program, yet fans don't show up. There's not the interest that there was once for Iowa basketball. And there's a concern that the same thing would happen to football. If you push out a successful coach, you can become like Iowa basketball became. You can be going through the 20-year wandering through the wilderness like Nebraska football is at this point. So there's a part of the fan base that is that way. And then there's the other side that just said, blow the whole thing up. Who cares? And another part of that is though Iowa has wins and you stack them up the last 3, the last 5, the last 10 years. This is a team in the nation that is top 10, top 12 in the country in terms of victories, but it just isn't fun. I mean, it is a grind, and you get out there and you beat Purdue 20-14 last week, and there's still angst about it because the enjoyment, what you hope for with football, it just isn't there. It's just not a fun experience anymore. So the back and forth continues, and the fan base fights, and well, I'm sure you're used to that from a year ago, right?
Yeah, it's got to be exhausting, right?
It is.
I imagine you have one faction who's just frustrated because it does feel like there's a bit of a ceiling until at least Kirk Ferentz is able to adjust this a little bit. And then on the other side, you have a group of fans who understand that it is difficult to win 8-9 games a year, right? And that's not something that you should just forget about. That Wisconsin had the same type of internal battles, the fan base, right? And then, what I learned, not even learned, like this is obvious, but you make a right hire and everybody gets on board.
Yeah.
Like nobody cares, right? No, I shouldn't say nobody, but nobody cares if you make the right hire because you elevate the ceiling. And in the age of NIL and the age of athletes that we live in now, whether people like it or not, excitement around the program is paramount. Like, you have to have excitement to build NIL. You have to have excitement to land recruits. And it was just getting progressively harder with the type of staff that we had, which is, I think, similar in a lot of ways to the type of staff you have to do that. So, yeah, I hear it, man. I'm glad that we have moved off that, to be honest. And all due respect to Paul Christ, who did great things at Wisconsin. But I think your fan base would be, if you made the right hire, would be totally on board.
Rejuvenated, and probably something that the fan base definitely needs. Well, we're going to talk about this year's matchup. We're going to get into that. Also, the future. The Big Ten West is going away after this year. What does that mean for Iowa, Wisconsin? We'll touch on the Hoopsters and make our predictions presented by FanDuel. We'll do that as we continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes, Locked On Badgers. It's a crossover edition here as we continue. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout, jacemedical.com. That's Jace, Jase, medical.com. We continue on Locked On Crossover here. It is Trent Condon alongside Ryan Herrings as we get ready for Iowa, Wisconsin. Well, Ryan, let's get into the matchup here.
Good.
And where I start with this is we've talked a lot about the offense, the change, the evolution. Still a team that's going to be based out of the run with the Longos doing with that offense, even though you're doing it more out of the spread. My question is defensively, because Iowa, since they shifted to the 3-4, they have not been able to figure this thing out. Though Iowa's got a couple of wins over the last decade plus, it has usually been a grind to be able to get there. So how does the defense look for the Badgers? How is the new system? Of course, no Jim Leonard there, and that was a sigh of relief when we saw that he didn't stay on with the Badgers.
Yeah, Leonard had success against Ferencz, to put it mildly. Leonard's a great defensive coordinator. The thing that I think Wisconsin fans struggle with this a little bit, but I think nationally people saw a bit of a drop off this year with Wisconsin's defense, and they say, well, Leonard is gone. That, it's all tied together. And again, not to minimize anything Leonard did. Leonard had a lot more NFL talent played than this Wisconsin defense does right now. Leonard last year, for example, had just Keanu Benton and Nick Herbig. Those are NFL guys. The year before, you're talking about Leo Chanel, who's played a lot for the Chiefs. So yeah, you're gonna have good defenses if you have NFL guys all over the front seven. And obviously Leonard was good as well. Honestly, the defense has been okay. There's been some breakdowns. The staff has been trying to mix a little bit of what they want to do with the personnel that they have. It's kind of some mismatched parts fitting into different areas. I will say this. They're coming off a Rutgers game where Rutgers came in wanting to run the ball. Gavin Wimsatt, not a huge threat throwing the ball, and Wisconsin really shut it down. And that's going into this Iowa game. Like, they're just going to put 10 guys in the box, and Hunter Woller's going to be flying around near the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to be really good. I think this team is more built to play the Iowas, right? They still have those pieces, those bigger inside linebackers, a bigger defensive line. Remember, their first couple games, they started against a Buffalo team, a Georgia Southern team, a Purdue team, a Washington State team. All these teams are heavy spread, throwing the ball everywhere. That's not really where Wisconsin is fully at yet with the personnel change. Against Iowa, they're going to put 10 in the box, and they're going to say, Deacon Hill beat us. And Deacon Hill's not going to beat Wisconsin in Madison. So I think they're going to be really good in this game, actually, even though it's not the same caliber of Jim Leonard defense.
A little bit different, but you mentioned Deacon Hill. You saw Deacon Hill, obviously, in his couple of years at Wisconsin. He is a guy that has a big arm. He is a big man. He's not accurate, and it is a bit of a problem. 6 of 21 last week against Purdue. A couple of drops, not many, not much that you can place, certainly on the blame of the receivers there. Iowa goes for the first time since the 1970s in a football game where a wide receiver does not catch a football. That is the Iowa offense that we're dealing with here. You saw Deacon Hill for the Hawkeyes and the perspective and the hope that he's going to get better. Look, I don't want to kill the kid, but I've said from the get-go, he's just not a good quarterback. And you can see that. He does not have the necessary accuracy to even be a starting caliber quarterback at the FBS level. He was on his way to Fordham for a reason. Yeah. And now he is starting for the Hawkeyes. So what you saw from him, and did you see anything that gave you maybe any hope? Because it's very difficult for me to see it.
No, I mean, listen, it's not like he played at Wisconsin, so we don't have anything to. But I'll tell you, he came in, and and again, it's not to kill the kid, but you got to be in shape, right? And it just is what it is. And he very quickly, when Phil Longo took over, Luke Fickell took over, he was like the first guy to transfer out. Like he very quickly realized, I'm not going to get playing time here. He's got a big arm that was all the way back to high school. We were excited about the big arm. And then he came to campus, and Miles Burkett, an in-state quarterback that really didn't have any other offers, jumped him right away in the depth chart, essentially. Then that just right there, I was like, it's not going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it just, quarterbacks, you have a finite window, and I don't think he has the goods whatsoever to beat Wisconsin, because he can't run. Like, Wisconsin is going to tee off on the running game, and they're going to dare Deacon Hill to beat him, and he's not accurate enough to do that. So I don't know, man. I look at it like, how is Iowa going to respond when Wisconsin does what they did to Rutgers? And I know Caleb Johnson came back. I know the running game. Yeah, he looked great. 7.9 per pop last game, I think it was. The offensive line looked better, but they're not going to be able to block 9 guys in the box. Mm-hmm. So what is Iowa's counter to that?
It's got to be deep shots. And, you talk a lot in games going in, hey, got to hit a couple of deep shots. It's not hit a couple. If Iowa realistically can win this football game, it's not hit a couple of deep shots. They're probably going to have to hit 4 or 5 deep shots, right? I mean, they're going to have 3 plays of 20-plus yards in the air and another couple 50-plus yarders. I mean, that's the only way that I can see it happening. And you couple that with Brian Ferentz's inability to do anything against this defense. You go back to the 38-14 game where Iowa's only points come off of 2 pick sixes from Josh Jackson. You go back to last year. I mean, that was at the time a broken Wisconsin team. Iowa wins a game 24-10, and you're like, oh, that was really good. Iowa, what do they have? 146 yards of total offense. I mean, it's just, it's not going to happen. We'll get into our predictions a little bit later, but that's kind of where we are. So yeah, it's not just Iowa hitting a couple of big plays in the pass game. I think they have to hit 5, 6, 7 big plays in the pass game. And with the inability of the wide receivers to get separation outside of Eric All, nothing in the pass game. Now, maybe it is Caleb Johnson. Maybe Caleb Johnson's able to go. I was running a lot more. It's not the traditional run scheme that you're probably used to seeing, inside, outside zone, and that's all they do. A lot more counters, a lot more ISOs, a lot more hat-on-hat blocking, kind of some old-school Wisconsin stuff that we're seeing a little bit more, and it has worked out certainly much better because the zone blocking scheme doesn't work in today's environment. After they changed the cut blocking rules 5 years ago, Kirk Ferentz wasn't willing to move with it, but you can't cut back that outside backer. You can't cut down that defensive end. And how many times on the outside zone looks like, oh man, it's blocked out in front, and then somebody comes from behind and it's a 2-yard loss. It's happened so much over the last 5 years. Iowa has worked to evolve past that. That is good to see in the running game. So yeah, there's a scheme there. There's the game plan. But Ryan, my question for you, we've had this conversation a lot here. The Big Ten West is going away, and it's been a godsend for really both Iowa and Wisconsin to have this division where you're the heavy heads, right? You are the power programs in this division. That's not happening anymore. What's been the perspective from Wisconsin when the schedules came out last week and you look, oh boy, we don't get Purdue and Illinois and Northwestern every single year. Now we got UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon on there, plus some more against Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. What's been your guys' takeaway?
Probably similar to yours. From a fan perspective, it's probably very similar. There's a mix of, oh dear Lord, like we're not going to win a game, right? You have that segment of the fan base, and then you have the mix of thank dear Lord, I don't have to spend my Saturdays watching Wisconsin Purdue. I get to watch a USC game, a UCLA game. It's exciting. It's fun. It goes back to your original point, right? Sports are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be exciting, and it's sometimes the build up to big games is better than the game itself. You spend a whole week looking forward to Wisconsin, Iowa when we're both good. But, Ohio State, USC, you spend 3 minutes looking forward to Wisconsin, Illinois, or Iowa, Indiana, whatever the random Big Ten matchups are, right? So it's a mix. I personally said where I'm at, man, I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. Let's be honest. The Big Ten West, in a way, I feel like has throttled the teams in that division because they haven't had to evolve. They haven't had to get better, right? Because you had nobody you had to race against. If you're racing against a bunch of slow people, you're going to stay slow.
Right.
So, and that's what we've done. That's what
Mhm.
collectively the West has done. So I like it. I think it's going to raise everybody's game. I think it raises the excitement, the exposure. I think that leads to better recruiting, better NIL opportunities. And it's also, listen, you don't have to be perfect anymore, right? You're going to be able to lose a game or two and still get to a 12-team playoff in the Big Ten. So I'm all for it. But certainly there is that aspect of fans that are frankly terrified that Wisconsin, Iowa, that type of program is never going to win the Big Ten again.
Yeah, and 18 teams got to be in the top 2 just to get there, but that silver lining, 9-3, if you play a tough schedule and you get a quality
Yeah,
win or 2 in there, you might be able to sneak in the back door and be an 11 seed and get your shot in the college football playoff, and how exciting that would be. Or even finish in the 5 to 8 range and get a home game. How incredible that would be. There's
that'd
still
be
that
so
hope
cool.
out there. Yeah, absolutely. And the chances of winning the Big Ten are going to be few and far between for Wisconsin and Iowa. Just that is the reality. To actually win this conference, it's going to be tough. But to be there, to get a shot against the big boy, to be a seat at the table, I think that's going to be really exciting going forward. We
Let me
talk
ask
about the yeah.
Let
Go
me
ahead,
ask you
Ryan.
on this topic before we move on really quick. Wisconsin fans, one of the big things we've talked about this year prior to these bigger schools coming in, and I say bigger mostly with USC, like
Mhm.
UCLA's gotten a little too much hype coming in. Like I've seen people say, "Be careful of UC." I don't know. Traditionally, that's not some power program, but my bigger point is Wisconsin fans have been excited moving off of Chris, thinking that Fickell is going to better prepare us going forward against this tougher schedule. Is there a concern that Brian Ferentz is, or not Brian, sorry, Kirk Ferentz and that coaching tree, because
Yeah,
obviously Brian is kind of attached there. Like, do you need to evolve now with a tougher schedule?
they do, but will they? Probably not. I mean
Mm.
that's the dichotomy, the back and forth that we continue with at this point in time. They need to, absolutely, but they needed 2-3 years ago, and here we still are doing the same kind of things. And there's a real chance Iowa gets blown out on Saturday. Iowa loses 27-7 again to Wisconsin. They go on. They could easily win out. I mean, the remaining schedule is an absolute joke. It's Minnesota, it's Rutgers, it's Northwestern, Nebraska, and I think that's it the rest of the way. I mean, they easily could be 10-2, 9-3 at minimum. And Kirk will just run it back. Hey, we're successful. We won 9 games again this year. Maybe they'll go win another Outback Bowl. And see, look, this still works. Not understanding what the future is going to be. And then the other burning question, if it has become a force piece from the athletic director, whoever that turns out to be, of getting rid of Brian Ferentz. Does Kirk just walk away? Does Kirk just say enough is enough? I'm not going to be here while my son is fired, and I'm going to retire.
Mm.
So that's kind of lingering out there too. What kind of damage has been done to the Iowa program? I mean, there's a lot of big picture questions that are out there if we get to that point. Hey, one quick one for you, Ryan. Basketball, we had Big Ten Media Day early in the week. Just a quick overview for us out there. You guys kind of took what we were the last couple of decades, what Iowa basketball was for me growing up in the 80s and 90s, and Wisconsin has taken that here as of recently. Didn't make the tournament a year ago. We're used to them pretty much year in, year out being in the top 5, though. A lot of returners for the Badgers. Where's the expectations for Wisconsin this year in hoops?
Probably back in that 4 to 6 range.
Okay.
I mean, if they don't make the tournament this year, guard's going to be on the hot seat, like
Yeah.
at a minimum expectation. College basketball is about, to some degree, experience. Experienced teams play better. They have every starter back. They added a big time transfer. I think there's a clear kind of top couple teams, right? With Purdue's up there. I think Indiana's going to be really good this year. Michigan State, and I think Wisconsin slots right in that next tier of programs. So people are excited about it. It should be better. I think they're still a little limited on star power on this team. They're a little
Yeah.
limited in the front court depth wise, but yeah, I think Badger fans are pretty excited about this year, and definitely, I would say a 4, 5, 6 type Big Ten basketball finish is very likely. If the team hits a ceiling, maybe a tick higher, but it's an exciting time. I think we're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. For Iowa, it is preseason number 9. Iowa's been here a ton. It's crazy. 10 of the last 11 years,
Mhm.
Iowa has finished in the top 6 in the Big Ten. And you kind of look at the years, year in and year out, lose all Americans. You lose the National Player of the Year, Luka Garza. And here comes the Murray twins, right? And we've seen them the last couple of years. McCaffrey's teams are normally not big expectations. Same thing here. I think this team is going to suck even worse defensively, which says a lot about Iowa and how bad they've been on the defensive end of the floor. But they're going to score with everybody. They're probably going to surprise some people. Is it going to be good enough to be an NCAA tournament team? I say no right now. I think they're going to be on the outside looking in, probably an NIT type of year. But you got to give credit to Fran, because that guy, what he has done, I mean, he could take you, me, and 3 listeners out there right now, and we probably put up 70 points in a college basketball game. He is such a wizard offensively, and the way that he gets, frankly, not great skill position players overall. You look 1 through 5, and he makes them really good offensively year in and year out. So should be a fun season. Maybe we'll hit up again in basketball season. But before that, let's get into our predictions, as we will make them as we continue here. Ryan's got a little something as we continue. It's a crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Badgers.
Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks to me is the simple. Listen, I don't have a ton of time. Like, Prize Picks is the simplest way for me to play daily fantasy sports. Just picking between 2 and 6 players. Stats. Are they going to go over and under? That's it. You're not competing against the hordes of people out there and their computers crunching numbers all night. The sharks out there. You don't have to compete with any of that with Prize Picks. It's just you against the numbers. It makes it so much simpler, so much easier. The app is incredibly easy to use. All types of sports, quick withdrawals, easy gameplays. I'm a big Braves fan. The guys on Locked On Badgers know that. I'm already on Acuna. One of my Prize Picks is Acuna over 1.5 bases tonight. I think he's going to get 7. Like, I'm all about it. He's going to get 2 bombs. So that's what Prize Picks is. It's just simple. It's easy. It takes all the complexity, all the pain out of the other daily fantasy sports places. This is why we use it on the Locked On Network. It's my number one go-to, and you're going to absolutely love it. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Ryan and Trent back with you one final time here. Locked On Hawkeyes, Locked On Badgers. It's a crossover edition. Well, we cut on Friday our college football live. It is an opportunity for everybody to find out everything that's going on in the world of college football. With college football season here, it happens for an hour each and every Friday, and you can find it on both the feeds right here. Locked On Big Ten. We got it on all the Locked On college stations. Locked On College Football kickoff live every Friday at 10 a.m. Central Time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. Ryan, as we wrap up here, it is time for our predictions in this game. I think people, if they've been listening all the way through, certainly know kind of the way that we are leaning, but kick it off here. I put it together. I think we know where you're going. Whiskey, how big is the number currently sits? Badgers favored by 10.
Let me ask you this even before we do that quick. The winner of this wins the West, right?
Yes,
is there any?
No doubt.
We didn't really touch on that, but this is barring craziness, and craziness does happen in college football at times, but there's nobody left on your schedule that really terrifies you. You'd have to lose 2 games if with Iowa lost. And for us, we play Ohio State, but outside of that, that would just equal out your Penn State loss. Mm-hmm. This is for the West, barring something insane, and that's unusual at this point in the season to be playing a game that's probably right. That speaks to how bad the rest of the division is, not the conference, the division. Listen, the over under is the last I saw it on FanDuel was I think 35.5, which is insane. You see my board back there. Take the under. Wisconsin is a 9.5 point favorite right now. This is the last line that I saw, unless it changed, but it's in that range. Listen, I don't think Iowa has much of a shot here. I'm just going to be completely honest, barring craziness, maybe Cooper has a couple more scores, which is always possible given that dude's skill set. But I think this is like a 24-6 game, 20-6. It's in that range. I don't know how they score. I just don't know how Iowa scores in this game, given that it's an offense that's already limited, and now you've brought it even more into a dangerous area with a quarterback that's not accurate. He's going on his first road game. He's inexperienced. He's going up against the Mike Tressel defense. That Tressel's a pretty experienced DC, even if it's not the perfect Wisconsin defense. I don't know how they score, Trent. Outside of a pick six, a punt return, which we know that can happen with Iowa, but I have no clue how they score. And I think if that's the case, the defense wears down. Wisconsin is going to struggle with Iowa's really good defense, as they always do, but eventually cracks in the dam break and water gets through.
I'm right there with you, and that's what I keep coming back to. an inability to make the makeables in the passing game, a run game that has really just never been able to get going against Wisconsin. In fact, I think this thing could get really, really bad. This thing could get away. Iowa can't pick up their downs, and that defense, we saw them wear down in the second half against Penn State. I have a feeling a similar thing is going to happen in this one. I got Wisconsin running away and winning at 30-7. So just over the number, but Wisconsin easily wins this one. It might be relatively close at half. I could see it, being 10-7, something like that. It's just the second half things get away, and Iowa, that defense on the field so long. So I am definitely laying it this week with Wisconsin, and prove me wrong, Hawkeyes. I don't have a good feeling that is going to be the case. Hey, Ryan, this is a lot of fun.
I was going to say really quick, is there any chance, obviously Deacon 6 of 21 last week, if he, in the first half of this game, I don't think this is France's style. Is there any chance he pivots to, I don't even know who your third string quarterback is. It Labus? Is it
Labus? Yeah. Joey Labus. Yeah. So Labus started the bowl game last year. They basically gave him nothing. I mean, after the opening drive, they took the ball out of his hands. They were running Sam Laporta as a Wildcat quarterback during that football game last year in Kentucky. They don't trust him. He was injured throughout the offseason. He had, the rumors were he had a sports hernia. It didn't get back until late August, but Kirk Ferentz's brain is broken as it pertains to quarterbacks. I mean, he has mishandled quarterbacks for so long. You look at last season, just not moving off of Spencer Petras when it was obvious he wasn't the guy. Now, Alex Padilla wasn't either, the former backup, but you go back to throughout time from not putting in Ricky Stanzi and keep playing Jake Christensen as he's chucking balls into the dirt. The Ricky Stanzi, Jake Rudock into CJ Beathard. There's been so many instances. His brain's broken. I don't know what it is. He's willing to play other guys at other positions, but quarterback is not the case here. So it'll be freaking Deacon all game long, likely. And if not, maybe he'll put Labus in the fourth quarter when it is 30-7 and give him a couple series there, but not until it gets really ugly will he pull the switch. He was asked, as Deacon was really struggling in the first half of the game, do you ever give thought? He looked at the person that asked the question in the press conference like they had two heads. He couldn't believe the question last week. That's where we are with Kirk Ferentz in quarterback play. So the Big Ten West is yours. We gave it to you, Ryan. Enjoy it. And then enjoy Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State in that championship game.
We'll worry about that when we get there.
Absolutely. And we'll do it again. That is Ryan Herrings. You can find him on Twitter at Ryan and Bucky. I'm Trent Condon with Locked On Hawkeyes at Trent Condon on Twitter. X is where you can find us. Our predictions presented by FanDuel. We'll talk to you again soon. Coming up later this week, I got more, including former Hawkeye LaShawn Daniels will jump in. We will talk to him about the renewed running game and if there's hope on that. And Ryan's got a lot more on the Badger side of things. Locked On Badgers. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks, and Ryan.
On Wisconsin. Let's get it.